What could possibly be so devastating that Fred Rogers, the gentlest man on television, stood up, walked off set, and never came back? This isn't the Mr. Rogers you think you know. Behind the quiet cardigans and calm voice was a moment so personal, so profound, it changed everything. Stay with us, because what happened next might just change how you see him forever. Born on March 20th, 1928, in the quiet town of Latrobe, Pennsylvania, Fred grew up surrounded by comfort. His father ran a successful business, and their spacious home had all the trappings of a happy childhood: music, books, and toys. But behind those brick walls was a boy who felt different. Chronic illnesses kept him indoors, separated from the joy of playgrounds and friendships. He spent hours by the window, watching life unfold from behind glass. That aching isolation didn't break him, it molded him. It gave him the gift of empathy. Fred didn't just learn to feel his own pain, he learned how to feel the pain of others. His mother tried to fill the silence with music and crafts, sewing puppets and playing piano by his side. Still, the hours dragged. Fred was a quiet, overweight child. He struggled to fit in, and his classmates didn't make it easier. He rarely spoke up in school, but he listened closely. He noticed every flicker of sadness, joy, or fear in the people around him. That quiet curiosity became his superpower, one he would later use to reach millions of children, not with flashy entertainment, but with understanding. One moment from his childhood carved itself into his memory like stone. Around age 11, local boys chased him down the street, cruelly calling him names. 11 blocks. He ran until he couldn't anymore. That day hurt more than any illness ever had, but that pain didn't sit still inside him. It transformed. Years later, Fred addressed bullying on his show, not as an outsider looking in, but as someone who had lived it. He spoke about it gently, showing kids how to respond with courage and kindness. There was one sanctuary in Fred's young life: his grandfather's farm. Every Sunday, the chaos of the world faded away. His grandfather, Fred McFeely, had a way of making him feel seen without saying much. But there was one sentence that changed everything. "Freddie, you make my day very special by being you." That simple sentence became a cornerstone of Fred's entire philosophy. It reminded him that worth wasn't something you earned, it was something you had just by existing. Later, he honored his grandfather by naming one of his puppet characters after him. High school brought the first major turning point. Fred started as a reserved boy, still bearing the wounds of childhood teasing. But one classmate, Jim Stumbaugh, reached out. That one friendship opened a door. Fred joined clubs, explored theater, and slowly stepped into leadership roles. By his senior year, he wasn't just participating, he was president of the student council. The same boy once called Fat Freddie now stood on stages, led discussions, and found his voice. That transformation taught him something he never forgot. One person believing in you can change everything. In 1946, Fred headed to Dartmouth College, but after a year, something didn't feel right. He transferred to Rollins College in Florida, and that decision set his course forever. There, Fred discovered music not just as a hobby but as a calling. He studied composition, wrote over 200 pieces, and graduated with honors in 1951. His senior project, a piano sonata. That passion for music would later become one of the most powerful tools he used to reach children. Gentle melodies that explained feelings when words couldn't. That same year, he went home and saw a television set for the first time. But instead of delight, he felt dismay. The show was loud, chaotic, and senseless. Slapstick and pie fights filled the screen. Fred didn't laugh, he frowned. This could be beautiful, he thought. And just like that, his path was set. He wouldn't use TV to entertain, he would use it to heal. In 1951, Fred moved to New York City and began working behind the scenes at NBC. The pressure was non-stop. He helped run props and manage live broadcasts for massive shows. But the more he saw, the more uneasy he felt. Everything was driven by ads, ratings, and noise. Where was the heart, the soul? Fred realized he didn't want to play that game. So in 1953, he walked away from mainstream television and took a different path, one almost nobody saw coming. He enrolled in a seminary in Pittsburgh and simultaneously began studying child development under Dr. Margaret McFarland. It was an unconventional combination: religion, psychology, and media. But that trio became the foundation of something no one else could replicate. That same year, Fred joined a new venture, WQED, America's first community-funded educational TV station. It operated from a repurposed mansion and ran on vision more than resources. Fred wore many hats: producer, puppeteer, musician. What started as filler content content for children became a storytelling wonderland. He created a puppet cast, Daniel Striped Tiger, King Friday, Lady Elaine, and infused them with warmth and wisdom. Audiences noticed. The show earned a national award and even aired on NBC. But Fred refused the spotlight. He let the characters, and the message, speak. And while doing all of this, he didn't pause his seminary studies. For 8 years, Fred lived a double life. He raced between classrooms and studios, sometimes still wearing his production clothes during lectures. He and co-host Josie Carey even traveled to New York weekly for live shows. And yet he stayed the course. He wasn't chasing fame. He was building something deeper. In 1963, he graduated and was ordained, not to preach sermons, to serve children through the screen. The church had never done anything like it before, but they understood something crucial. Fred's congregation was already tuning in. Millions of kids, each needing someone to simply say, "You are special, just the way you are." In 1963, Fred Rogers quietly crossed a border that would forever change children's television, though few knew it at the time. He left the familiarity of Pittsburgh for Canada, carrying with him little more than a dream and a gentle philosophy. At the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, he was finally nudged into the spotlight. Before that, Fred had always stayed behind the scenes, writing and producing. It was CBC executive Fred Rainsbury who gently insisted he appear on screen. For the first time, viewers saw the shy, soft-spoken man who would become a household name. He wasn't flashy, and he didn't try to be. Yet in those modest 15-minute episodes, 137 of them, he began shaping something quietly revolutionary. His approach was unlike anything else on television. He spoke slowly, directly to children, created a world where kindness wasn't a message. It was the air you breathed. There, in the quiet corners of Canadian television, Fred found his voice, and that voice, so soft yet so unwavering, carried something profound. When he returned to Pittsburgh in 1966, it wasn't just a homecoming. He brought with him a blueprint for something extraordinary. He regained the rights to his show and reimagined it from the ground up. At WQED, a humble public TV station, had stitched together old ideas with fresh intent. He kept pieces like make-believe, but infused them with deeper emotional purpose. Then came the miracle, funding from the Sears Roebuck Foundation. That funding turned a local gem into a national treasure. On February 19, 1968, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was broadcast across the country. By 1969, Fred's message reached beyond the screen. President Nixon was cutting public TV funding in half. So Fred walked into the Senate, softly spoken and alone, to ask them to reconsider. Most people would have walked away from such pressure. Fred stood his ground, not with anger, but with sincerity. He read lyrics from his show and explained how $6,000, a fraction of a cartoon's budget, could nurture children's emotional well-being. The room, known for hard-nosed politics, fell silent. Then Senator Pastore, known for being tough, looked at Fred and simply said, "Looks like you just earned the $20 million. It was a moment no one expected, a soft voice defeating political noise. Just days later on the show itself, Fred delivered another subtle but powerful message. At a time when segregation in public pools still lingered, Fred did something that seemed simple but carried weight. He invited Officer Clemens, a black actor, to join him in soaking their feet in a kiddie pool. They sat together, shared water, shared a towel. No lecture, just presence. The message was quiet but thunderous. Everyone belongs. Years later, Fred would privately wash Francois Clément's feet off camera and whisper, "Thank you for everything." It wasn't for the audience. It was from the heart. By the mid-1980s, the show was reaching nearly 2 million American homes. Fred, ever humble, kept doing what he'd always done, writing every script, voicing every puppet, composing songs, even operas. Over 200 songs and 13 operas would flow from his pen. He didn't just appear on camera, he built the entire world behind it. Even when the final new episode aired in 2001, reruns lived on, continuing to cradle viewers in their safe corner of television. But behind that legacy was a growing frustration. Fred was worried. Children's TV was changing, and not for the better. It was becoming louder, flashier, and focused on selling. Fred resisted. He refused to commercialize his message. He wouldn't sell toys. He wouldn't allow his image to promote fast food. Even when Burger King spoofed him in an ad, he demanded it be pulled. For Fred, childhood wasn't a market. It was sacred. His personal values ran just as deep. In the early 1970s, Fred chose to become a vegetarian. His reasoning was simple and compassionate. I don't want to eat anything that has a mother. Inspired by a book titled Diet for a Small Planet, he committed to showing kindness not just to children, but to animals too. On his show, food scenes never featured meat. Even restaurants depicted in episodes showed meatless meals. And in one memorable moment, he wrote a song urging people not to die baby chicks. That empathy wasn't performative, it was who he was. Fred never avoided the hard stuff. In June 1968, just 2 days after Robert Kennedy's death, he aired a special episode. Daniel Striped Tiger, one of Fred's puppet characters, gently asked, "What does assassination mean?" Fred didn't flinch. He answered, not to frighten, but to help. He believed when children understand, they feel less afraid. Over the years, he talked about death, divorce, war, and even the fears children often carry but can't name. His message was always the same. Your feelings are valid and you are loved just the way you are. But life on set wasn't all solemn. It was full of laughter too. Between 1985 and 1990, the Mr. Rogers crew was a playful family. Fred might have been calm on screen, but he delighted in jokes. One day, he came in singing as usual, only to find his shoes mysteriously too small. Turns out, a crew member had swapped them. Fred laughed so hard he had to stop singing. Another prank? Someone left an inappropriate image for him to find. He didn't get mad. He turned it into a joke, had it enlarged, and gifted it to the prankster at Christmas. Even his musicians, jazz legends like Johnny Costa and Joe Negri, were treated like stars. In 1985, Fred introduced them to the audience, breaking the illusion for a moment to show the real people who created the music. They weren't just background players, they were part of the soul of the show. And that's what Fred always knew. Magic wasn't in make-believe. It was in the real connections, the moments shared, the quiet truths whispered in a noisy world. It started with jazz, real jazz, played live on set by musicians who didn't follow scripts. Johnny Costa would watch Fred Rogers move and simply follow the energy. That's what made the show different. There was no pretending. Every note, every smile, every quiet pause was part of a living moment. When Fred introduced the musicians, he didn't just read names. He helped children understand how each person brought their own rhythm to the magic. It wasn't about ego. It was about showing kids that everyone contributes, everyone matters. That same message, simple but revolutionary, wove through every quiet frame of the show. And here's the kicker. Fred Rogers was a minister, yet you wouldn't know unless someone told you. No sermons, no preaching, just gentle truths about love, listening, patience, grief. This was his pulpit, and he delivered each message not with force, but with presence. He obeyed public television rules by keeping things secular, but every episode was soaked in belief, not in doctrine, but in humanity. The way he addressed tough subjects, grief, racism, divorce, was so subtle most adults didn't catch it, but kids did. He didn't rush to explain away sadness. He gave space. He trusted children to understand more than the world usually gives them credit for. It was a quiet resistance to the flashy, noisy, fast-paced media around him. And in a time where everything is louder than ever, that calm rebellion feels even more heroic. Now here's something that still surprises people. Fred was a registered Republican most of his life. It's easy to assume that wouldn't align with his values, but Fred didn't care about party lines. He cared about people. He believed in public television. He fought for its funding. And when political media later accused him of making kids feel too special, Fred didn't flinch. He knew who he was. His wife Joanne once said that modern political figures would have made him rethink his affiliation. But Fred never played for sides. He played for kindness. That was his party. But even Fred wasn't untouched by the contradictions of his time. One of his most cherished relationships was with Francois Clemens, the actor who played Officer Clemens. Their connection was deep, almost familial. Yet when Fred learned Francois was gay, he asked him to keep it hidden. It was the late 60s, and a single revelation could have ended everything. Fred even suggested he marry a woman for appearances, which Francois did. That marriage didn't last, but their friendship did. Years later, Fred apologized and embraced Francois and his partners fully. It was quiet growth. He didn't speak on LGBTQ issues in interviews, but his actions, like famously sharing a footbath with Francois on air, spoke louder than any press statement could. It wasn't perfection, it was evolution. Still, some battles came from the outside. In 1990, something vile surfaced. A hate group used Fred's voice to create twisted audio tapes that mimicked his show, but with cruel, racist messages. They even gave out a number kids could call. Fred was devastated. His team acted fast. Within 24 hours, a federal judge forced the group to stop and surrender the tapes. For once, Fred used legal force, not for fame, not for money, but to shield children from hatred dressed as friendliness. That was the line he wouldn't let anyone cross. He was often parodied. Saturday Night Live's Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood by Eddie Murphy was the most iconic. Fred didn't mind. He saw the humor, the affection beneath it. But when corporations used his likeness without respect, like Burger King with a fake Mr. Rodney, Fred made one phone call. The ad vanished. That's all it took. But when someone drew him holding a weapon on a t-shirt, he sued. Not because he was offended personally, but because he protected trust like treasure. He believed children needed someone they could believe in, and he would not let that bond be broken. And if Fred Rogers was the soul of the show, Joanne was its compass. Their marriage was the kind of quiet love story most people dream of. No drama, no headlines, just handwritten proposals and piano duets. They raised two sons, James and John, who later confirmed that their dad was exactly the same at home as he was on TV. That kind of consistency is rare, and it made Fred all the more real. When Joanne passed away in 2021, it felt like losing the other half of the heartbeat that kept that show alive. Fred also had habits that bordered on sacred. For over 3 decades, he kept his weight at exactly 143 pounds. A code he said meant, I love you. 1 letter in I, 4 in love, 3 in you. He swam daily, avoided caffeine, skipped meat, and stuck to a rigid routine. His indulgence? A small splash of Kahlua over ice cream. That was Fred's rebellion. Sweet, small, and sincere. In a world chasing excess, he chose balance. Pennsylvania even declared the 143rd day of the year as 143rd Day in his honor. That's how deeply his presence still echoed. When his final episode aired in 2001, Fred said goodbye gently through puppets and paintings and quiet words. Just days later, the world was shattered by 9/11. And in that collective aid, Fred returned with a special message. Look for the helpers, he said, and people did. It wasn't just a line, it became a lifeline. He had already stepped back, but the world needed him, and he showed up. That's what he always did. By the time 2003 arrived, Fred was in pain. Doctors found cancer had spread too far. Even then, his last public moment was riding as Grand Marshal of the Rose Parade. Weeks later, he passed quietly at home, surrounded by his family. The nation grieved. But Fred didn't just leave memories. He left a template, a guide for how to live with dignity and love. Though Fred Rogers wasn't known for luxury, his legacy is rich in meaning. He didn't chase fortune, but his estate at passing was estimated near $3 million. He lived modestly in a 2-story home in Pittsburgh, with no exotic sports cars or jets. His favorite car was a plain old Saturn. His biggest investment was into public media and people. He did, however, have asset protection. Fred held health and life insurance policies and established trusts for his family. His approach to money was simple. Live below your means, invest in others, and let your values shape your wealth. Fred's life whispered where others shouted. He didn't need flash. He had purpose, and if you listen closely, you can still hear that gentle voice saying, you make every day special, just by being you. And that's the moment Mr. Rogers showed us even the kindest hearts have their breaking point. If you felt that, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood truths. Next up, we're diving into another icon whose smile hid a storm. Don't miss it, because in Fred Rogers' Neighborhood, even silence told a powerful story.